one of the, we use Schoology. One of the really great things that we can do with Schoology is you can assign folders to groups of students, and so you can, and the other students don't even see who's getting what folder. And then you can also leverage the digital tools such as like Encyclopedia Britannica and our Gale databases, or whatever your district is subscribing to, or even free resources that you can find Lexiled for different reading levels, and you can the same content and come at it from multiple different points of view. Again, I would always suggest if you're having a video, that you also have the transcript, make sure your video is closed captioned, and that you are giving students different multiple entry points. And if you always design things with universal design in your mind as you're building your online classroom in your learning management system, I think you'll find that will work really well for your students.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that goes back to knowing your learning management systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes there's so many great resources inside of our learning management systems already that we don't realize how we really can differentiate right inside that learning management system. Now, depending upon if your school district doesn't have a learning management system per se, then I think what we need to begin thinking about is, again, knowing who are the kids in your classroom, and also partnering with the areas. So if I am working with GT students, for example, checking with my GT office, what kind of things do they recommend? What tools are already available? And I love the idea of the universal design for learning, because generally what works when you do universal design for learning, it works for all of the students in that classroom. The other things is to think about too is we're in an online environment, so things don't always necessarily transfer the same way, or way I capture the information. We need to also think about how long students have already been sitting in front of a device when we are delivering this instruction. And going back to our English language learners again, just because we put it out there, is it also accessible for all learners, right? So I love when you talked about like if it's in a PDF, is it in multiple languages? You know, like how is everyone gonna be able to have access to this information? So that's the key thing, I think, when we talk about differentiating the instruction.
And assessment is always on everybody's forefront of their mind. How do you have any suggestions on assessing students in different non-traditional ways?
Well, I think it still goes back to, I know you need to look at your curriculum and whatever those assessment tools are, but I cannot stress enough that we are right now in the midst of a pandemic. And in addition to pandemic, we also are dealing with a lot of current events that are also maybe traumatizing our students, and kind of a lot of angst for some of our student populations. So I think a lot of the assessments that we do are fine, but I cannot stress enough to just make sure we focus on also those social and emotional well-being of our students and our families, because that's an important entry point as well, right? So yes, assess our students, be flexible, because some of our kids right now have become essential workers because parents have lost jobs, right? So some of our kids, parents are going back to school, but they now may be in daycare and may not have access to Wi-Fi at a certain time. So I think the key thing with this online learning is we have to be very flexible with our assessments. That doesn't mean we hold anyone to a lower standard. It just means we have to rethink how we are teaching during a pandemic, in the midst of this pandemic. That's the biggest piece, I think, with assessments.
I completely agree with that. And I think as you think about assessments, you also need to think about it differently. Yeah. Like, don't think about that, multiple choice test dipstick. You're thinking about having the kids show you what that they know it. Like maybe you're using Flipgrid and they're telling you about it, or maybe there's a Padlet and they are just like quickly posting, or maybe you're doing a poll using your learning management system, or maybe it's a phone call and you have that one-on-one conversation with that kid to make sure that they are really getting what you need them to be learning, and that they are feeling okay about everything that's going on, and that their emotional health is good in that moment.